All right, folks, strap in because today we're stepping into the shadows of New York's underworld to rank the bosses of one of the most powerful families in American history, the Gambinos. From backroom butcher shops to boardroom tactics, this family didn't just deal in dope and strong arm tactics. They built empires, made millions, and in some cases, paid the ultimate price. Now, I want to be clear up front. We're only talking official bosses here. No front bosses, no acting bosses, just the real McCoy, the men who officially held the title and the power. And I didn't just pull the rankings out of a fedora. We're diving deep. This list is based on 6 key categories: leadership, administration and management, economic impact, influence and power, discipline and control, and finally, legacy. Some of these guys ruled with strategy and others with fear. Some built fortunes and others left the family in ruins. And yes, I know what you're thinking. Where's John Gotti ranked? Let's just say he ain't at the top. So whether you're a wise guy in train or a full-blown mob history buff, grab a cannoli and settle in because I'm about to walk you through the Gambino bosses from worst to first. Let's start at the bottom with Peter Gotti. Coming in dead last on our list, Peter Gotti. Now listen, being born into the Gotti name doesn't automatically make you a gangster. And Peter, he proved it. The guy started out as a sanitation worker. Before he was boss of the Gambino family, he was literally taking out trash in New York, and some would say poetic foreshadowing. Peter didn't get inducted into the family until he was 49 years old. His promotions, all thanks to his brother, the one and only John Gotti. John had him running errands, chauffeuring wise guys, and hanging around the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club. But behind closed doors, even John called him not the sharpest knife in the drawer. And the nickname the media gave him, the dumbest Don, that hurts. When Peter officially became boss in 2002 after John died in prison, the Gambinos were already limping. Prosecutors were coming down hard. Half the family had flipped, and morale was in the toilet. Peter seemed like a decent enough guy and was put into a position that was unfair for him and the Gambinos. In the life, you always have people striving for the top, and the people under him weren't showing respect. Instead of revigorating the ranks, Peter just held the steering wheel and coasted. No bold moves, no new rackets. His leadership style, think caretaker, not general. He did try to take revenge on Sammy the Bull Gravano for flipping on John Gotti, tried to have him clipped down in Arizona, but like many of Peter's plans, it backfired. The feds caught wind, used it against him in court, and boom, more years tacked onto his sentence. Oh, and let's not forget the Steven Seagal thing. Under Peter Gotti, the Gambinos tried to extort Seagal. You can't make this up. In the end, Peter got slammed with what would be a life bid as he died in prison in 2021, blind in one eye, with heart problems, and a mixed legacy. Look, he wasn't a rat, he didn't betray the family, but he was also the boss during a period of time where the mob was already declining. He inherited the kingdom and watched it crumble, and that's why he sits at the bottom of this list. All right, up next, we have the most famous Gambino boss and one of the most controversial, John Joseph Gotti Jr., the Dapper Don, the Teflon Don, the man who turned the Mafia into front-page news and a media circus. Gotti didn't just join the mob, he owned it. From the streets of East New York to the top of the food chain, he climbed fast, made his bones early, and wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. But let's call it like it is. Gotti was a gangster first and a boss second, a legend in his own right who loved the life. In 1985, he pulled off the most daring move in modern mob history. He had his own boss, Paul Castellano, taken out in front of Sparks Steakhouse in broad daylight. Unsanctioned, no commission vote, just bullets and ambition. 2 weeks later, Gotti was crowned the boss without the commission giving their blessing, like a street coup straight out of Shakespeare, if Shakespeare wore Brioni suits and smoked cigars in Ozone Park. As boss, Gotti broke every rule that had kept the mob alive for decades. He invited attention, held nightly court at the Ravenite Social Club, dressed like a movie star, and beat cases left and right, thanks to witness intimidation and jury tampering. The press called him the Teflon Don because nothing would stick until it did. What brought him down? It was his own voice. FBI wiretaps caught him talking way too much, including talking about his underboss Sammy Gravano, the Louis de Bono hit, and many other mob executions. His biggest mistake was giving Sammy Gravano power. Sammy flipped, testified, and just like that, the feds had their case. In 1992, John Gotti was convicted of murder, racketeering, conspiracy, you name it, life without parole. And just like that, the Teflon Don became the Velcro Don. John Gotti had a horrible time in prison and was in solitary confinement for years. When he got sick with throat cancer, the prison told Gotti just to take an aspirin. Can you believe that? A preventable death if he had gotten the right medical treatment. Gotti died in prison from cancer in 2002, but his legend, still alive, his funeral was one for the ages, fit for a president or a king. So why isn't he higher on this list? Because while Gotti had swagger, he spent much of his reign in prison. The Ravenite tapes were so damning for Gotti and his consigliere and friend Frank Licasio. This put him straight into the crosshairs of the FBI, and this time he couldn't get out of it, especially since he was public enemy number one for the feds. Gotti burned hot, he burned bright, but he also went down in the blaze. Now we're stepping into the world of pure fear. Albert Anastasia, nicknamed the Mad Hatter and the Lord High Executioner. Yeah, not exactly the kind of guy you'd invite over for Sunday dinner. Born in Calabria, Italy, he came up through the Brooklyn docks and made a name for himself doing what he did best, putting people on ice. He was a founding member of Murder Incorporated, the mob's national hit squad in the 30s and 40s. Some say he was responsible for dozens of hits, and others say it was over 100. Either way, you didn't cross this guy. But here's the thing about living by the sword. You usually die by it. Anastasia rose to power after allegedly taking out his own boss, Vincent Mangano. Both Mangano brothers vanished or turned up dead in 1951, and just like that, Albert was boss. But his leadership style, let's just say solidity, wasn't his strong suit. He ruled through fear, no finesse, no diplomacy. His first move as boss, allegedly he had his former underboss whacked just for suspicion of disloyalty. And while he had powerful friends like Frank Costello and Lucky Luciano backing him up, he also had enemies watching closely, especially one man, his own underboss, Carlo Gambino. Gambino saw the writing on the wall, and he read it in blood. On October 25, 1957, Anastasia walked into a barber shop at the Park Sheraton Hotel and never walked out. Two masked gunmen rushed in and took him out while he was still in the chair, towel around his neck. Legend has it he lunged at the gunman's reflection in the mirror, confused and disoriented. A brutal end, but poetic, considering the life he led. In the end, Anastasia was a terrifying figure who let violence drive his rule. But the problem with ruling by fear, eventually everyone becomes afraid of you. He helped define the brutality of mid-century organized crime, but as boss, his paranoia and outbursts made him unstable. And in this life, unstable gets you replaced. Now, if John Gotti was a rock star mob boss, Dom Cefalù was the jazz musician, smooth, subtle, and always in the background, until it was time to take the lead. Born in Palermo, Sicily, Cefalù was swept into the old world mafia values from day one. He wasn't chasing headlines. He wasn't flexing in designer suits. The guy was literally working a bakery supply job while running the Gambino family. Let that sink in. Cefalù came up through the Sicilian faction, the Zips, known for their tight-knit loyalty, and let's be honest, their willingness to move heavy weight. Yep, we're talking international H trafficking during the Pizza Connection era. He did time, kept his mouth shut, refused to testify even under contempt threats. That earned him real respect inside the life. After the Gotti era left the family fractured, Cefalù stepped in, officially becoming boss in 2011. And just like that, the Gotti dynasty was over. His mission, restore order, bring discipline, get the family out of the newspapers and back into the shadows. Under his leadership, the Gambinos reconnected with their Sicilian roots, reviving ties to the Inzerillo clan and rebuilding transatlantic operations. But Cefalù did it all under the radar. No Ravenite social club, no nightly press photos, no courtroom antics. He turned down the volume and turned up the profits. Even the FBI had to admit it was a return to form. One agent said they're tired of the old, fat, lazy American Italians who turn into rats, so they put a Sicilian in charge. And you know what? It worked. Cefalù stabilized the family, avoided mass indictments, and quietly slipped into semi-retirement without ever seeing the inside of a prison cell as boss. Legacy-wise, he may not be a household name, but inside the life, he's remembered as the man who saved the family from self-destruction. Sometimes the strongest leaders are the ones who don't need to be seen. Now here's a man who brought a briefcase to a street fight. Paul Castellano, known as the Pope, wasn't your typical mob boss. While others were holding court in social clubs, Paul was holding meetings in his 17-room mansion on Staten Island. They called it the White House, and that wasn't a joke. Castellano came up not through violence, but through business. He built dial poetry into a near monopoly using mob muscle to corner the meat market. This guy made chicken rackets look like a Fortune 500 venture. And when Carlo Gambino died in 1976, instead of passing the torch to Neil Delacroce, his old-school underboss, Carlo chose Castellano. That decision, it created a civil war waiting to happen. Castellano was smart, no doubt. He helped turn the Gambinos into a money-making machine, construction, concrete, extortion, you name it. But here's where it went sideways. Paul was detached. He didn't understand the street guys, thought he was above them, and they felt it. Gotti's crew, they hated him. Castellano was punishing guys for dealing dope, but still pocketing the money from those same deals. Classic, do as I say, not as I do, hypocrisy. Then came the ultimate insult. When Delacroce died in 1985, Castellano didn't even show up to the wake. That was it. The gloves came off. On December 16, 1985, Castellano and his driver Tommy Bellotti, the new underboss, pulled up to Sparks Steakhouse and never made it to dinner. Gotti had him taken out in a hell of gunfire, unsanctioned, in public, and on camera. It was a Mafia earthquake. For the first time since maybe the Vincent Mangano hit, a New York boss was clipped without permission. Paul's reign ended not with a retirement, not in a courtroom, but on the cold pavement outside a steakhouse. His legacy, very complicated. On one hand, Castellano was a visionary. He saw the future of organized crime in white-collar rackets. He made millions, and he treated the mob like a corporation. On the other hand, he forgot that being a boss isn't just about the books. It's about the guys in the trenches. And when you forget the streets don't forget you. A brilliant businessman, but in this life, that only gets you so far. Before the family was called Gambino, it was the Mangano family. And at the top, Vincent Mangano, one of the original five families' bosses handpicked when Lucky Luciano reshaped the Mafia in 1931. This guy was old school, even for the old school. Traditional Sicilian, ran things with honor, respect, and a firm handshake. He wasn't flashy, didn't crave headlines. In fact, most people hadn't even heard his name. But don't let that fool you. Under Mangano, the family got rich and powerful. His bread and butter, the Brooklyn waterfront. Through control of the Longshoremen's Union, Mangano ran extortion rackets that touched every ship coming in and out of New York. You wanted to move cargo, you paid Mangano. And politically, he wasn't just racketeering. He was rubbing elbows with crooked politicians through the City Democratic Club. This guy was laying the infrastructure of the family. But here's the twist. His own underboss, Albert Anastasia, was quietly building his own empire within the family. While Mangano focused on unions, Anastasia was running Murder Incorporated, the National Crime Syndicate's execution squad. The problem? Anastasia started taking orders from Frank Costello and Lucky Luciano without clearing it with Mangano. The tension grew fast. Fights, shouting matches, allegedly even came to blows. Mangano saw the writing on the wall, but not soon enough. In 1951, his brother Philip Mangano was found shot dead in a marsh in Brooklyn. Vincent disappeared completely, vanished off the face of the earth. No body, no funeral, no goodbye. The only real clue? Anastasia stepped in as boss the very next day. You do the math. Mangano's death was one of the first major internal coups in Mafia history, and it set a precedent that would be repeated decades later with Castellano and Gotti. So why doesn't Mangano rank higher? Because while he was a smart, effective boss, he failed at one crucial thing, controlling his underboss. He let a monster grow inside his own family, and it cost him everything. Still, let's give credit where it's due. Mangano laid the groundwork. The docks, the unions, the quiet power behind the curtain. That was all him. Without Mangano, there's no Gambino family. Here he is, the gold standard. Carlo Gambino. No scandals, no public spectacle, no prison sentence, and no bullet-riddled sidewalk. The man ran the most powerful crime family in America for nearly 20 years and died in his own bed. That's a dream, right? Born in Palermo, Sicily, he was made in the Mafia before he could legally drink. Came to the U.S. during Prohibition and climbed the ranks by keeping his head down and his ear to the street. But Carlo wasn't just another tough guy. He was a strategist, quiet, patient, and always 3 steps ahead. When Albert Anastasia was rubbing people out left and right, Gambino waited and struck. In 1957, Anastasia was clipped in a barber shop, and Carlo, he stepped into power with barely a ripple. Once he was boss, Gambino transformed the family into a national powerhouse. Labor unions, the ports, trucking, the garment district, JFK Airport. He didn't just run the mob, he ran the infrastructure of New York. But here's what made him special. He didn't want to be famous. He avoided the limelight like it was the plague. No press, no Ravenite social club, no flashy suits, just a quiet smile and total control. He banned narcotics in the family, officially at least, because he knew the heat it brought. And he was right. That decision delayed the downfall of the 5 families for years. Carlo played chess while everyone else was flipping cards. Even the feds struggled to touch him. His only prison time? A Prohibition-era bootlegging charge in the 1930s. After that, nothing stuck. When he died in 1976 at 74 years old, Gambino passed the torch to Paul Castellano, a move meant to preserve the legacy of wealth and quiet power. Now, was that the right call? History says maybe not. Castellano's reign ended in gunfire. But it doesn't tarnish what Carlo built. His name lives on, literally, to this day. It's still called the Gambino family nearly 50 years after his death. That's not just leadership, that's immortality. In a world where most bosses either flip, get clipped, or died behind bars, Carlo Gambino remains the one who played the game and won. Okay, so there you have it. Every official boss of the Gambino family ranked from worst to Don Carlo. From caretakers to killers, from media icons to silent strategists, every one of these men left a mark. Some ran it like a circus, others like a boardroom, and one like an invisible crime empire. Now, here's the fun part. I want your opinion. Did I get it right? Would you have put Gotti higher? Does Castellano deserve more credit? Or maybe you think Anastasia should have been number one. Drop your rankings in the comments. I read every one, and trust me, I've seen some really interesting ones out there. And hey, if you really love mob history, not the Hollywood fluff, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and join the family. Because here, we talk the real stories with real research and zero sugarcoating. And if you like this one, stick around. There's a lot more coming. We're just getting started. Thanks for watching. Take care, stay safe, and God bless you always.